you develop as you get older, whether you're 18 to 22 or whether you're 18 to 20. I think there's inevitable change. Been very busy, as most people are, whether you're recruiting right after the season, you're right into the recruiting season, 2 weeks, traveling a lot, trying to get to see the guys, getting your one visit in before signing date. You're also bowl prep and practices and things of that nature. So it's entirely different from the way I think it's used to have been. So talking to them on the phone this morning, a lot of guys very excited, planning on celebrations at their high school, those type of things. So be a good day for them. Be a good day. These guys were all targeted early in the process for the most part, and have been committed for quite some time. So overall class notes, I guess you'd say very balanced: 8 offense, 10 defense, 1 outstanding special teams guy. Many good students. One thing that I keep looking at, many of our guys are state champions. I'm looking down through your multiple state champions across: Ricky White, Kyle King, Kyle Halliday as seniors, Petrowski, Devin Hightower as juniors. Several more played in state title games. Noah Kim was a 2-time state champion. Many of them playing at the highest level of high school football in their state. The players in this class, I feel like when you look at them, had extremely productive senior seasons. As you look and see that Angelo Gross was, second in Mr. Ohio. He was the defensive player of the year in the Division III in Ohio. You have Petrowski in the biggest division there, defensive player of the year. Devin Hightower, Division II defensive player of the year. Kyle King, Mr. Indiana at his position, defensive end in Indiana. So quite a few of those type of guys. 3 Ohio players, Division I and II and III, as I said. Impressive group of wideouts, impressive group of defensive linemen. I feel a lot of multi-sport athletes, and 7 players are actually enrolling early. We will continue to recruit into February. We've got a couple guys sitting on the fence, and we'll try and address the running back situation as we go forward. But I'm going to just go through what I would consider power, big skill and skilled players, and then we can take some questions afterwards. So first guy up to Dallas Fincher, all Dream Team in Michigan Dream Team selection, highly rated center and offensive lineman, had him in camp, athletic, committed last spring actually. He's been a 3-year starter at East Kentwood. His father Mark played for Coach Perlis, so he's a legacy type guy. What sticks out to him is size, athletic ability, and the fact that he can play center sort of distinguishes him a little bit because, it's tough. It's tough playing center. Coached by Tony Kimbrough, but an outstanding young man, about 280 pounds, 6'4" or so, and we look for him to get involved early in the process as he moves here. Next guy is Justin Stevens from Ontario, Canada. A little bit different camp here. Really played defensive lineman for the most part in his high school career. Went to post high school in Canada. What we saw was a big athletic guy, 6'5 plus, 290 to 300 pounds. Really run, vertical jumped over 30 inches in our camp. Had a good long jump near 9 foot as a big guy. And the question was whether we were going to try and transition him to the offensive side of the ball, which he played this last year. So he'll come in at mid-season here. So he'll be a guy that has an opportunity to lay a foundation for himself here. But he has a tremendous upside in terms of his athletic ability and size and strength. So looking forward to him being here as well. Justin Simeon-Barrow, the top defensive end in Georgia, was a guy that we looked at early in the process last spring and immediately offered him, excuse me, and watched him practice in the spring. Our assistants did. Ranked as named regional player of the year. Strong season with 8 sacks as a senior. Could play defensive tackles, weighing about 250 now, but he may get up to 280 quickly, I don't know. But athletic, run, a guy that will fit in our defensive system, and a guy that I feel is sort of a doer in terms of how he plays. Outstanding athlete, though. Guy that we pointed to and felt like we needed to get. Avery Dunn. A couple of these guys had great senior seasons. 6'4", 225. Guy that has grown and gained probably 20 pounds in the last year. When you talk to the coaches throughout Ohio, guy that's name kept coming up was Avery Dunn as being one of the top players in Northeast Ohio. First team All-State in Ohio, great length, could probably play linebacker, he runs very effectively. We'll work him as a defensive end, reminds me a little bit of Shalik Calhoun in a lot of ways. Explosive guy, long, athletic, should be a great player for us here as he moves forward. Kyle King, defensive end, cleans 380, 250 pounds, 6'3" plus. In defensive lineman, as I said, in the state of Indiana, back-to-back state titles. Kyle Ralph is his coach. Actually recruited Kyle way back when I was here before. Very, very explosive, tough guy, can run very, very well, plays tight end as well. I feel like Kyle has a huge upside. He will also start here early in this next semester. Chris Mayfield was out this year with a knee, his senior season, but so the film that you see is from his junior year, very athletic. He started in basketball really for 4 years as a ninth grader at Hilliard Bradley High School, which is a big high school down in the Columbus area. Athletic, again, is another guy that comes in as a defensive end and grow to a defensive tackle, 255 right now, about 6'3", rated one of the top players in Ohio as well. Jeff Petrowski, Ohio Division I Defensive Player of the Year, co-defensive player of the year, I guess I would say. Cleveland Defensive Player of the Year, St. Ed's. It's an institution that plays the same defense that we do, so there's a lot of carryover in that respect. Reminds me a lot of Kenny Willekes in the way he plays. Sort of relentless guy, tough, on the edge guy, weighing about 250 pounds as well, 6'1", over 6'1", probably more closer to 6'2", but extremely productive player. Has been productive for quite a while there. Played Mike linebacker as well, so he has the ability to play up, and should be a guy that has an opportunity for an immediate contributions as we go. And one other guy I wanted to mention, defensive line, Jalen Hunt, we took last year coming out of the summer, and basically wanted to include him in this class. He came in about 320 or so, now he's about 305. He was a dream team selection at Belleville, and the guy's going to be a great player for us. Explosive, great change of direction, had a great year academically as well, and I think he's on the cusp. He traveled the last half of the season on the cusp of playing, may play a little bit in the bowl game as well. When you look at our big skill, Tommy Guardo, tight end from Dearborn, multi-sport athlete, one of our earliest commitments in the class. Coach John Powell is his coach, athletic, great hands, came to camp, demonstrated his hands, his ability to run after catch, those type of things. Wanted to be a Spartan from the get-go, and he's been committed for a long time here, but extremely athletic, 6'3", probably going about 235 right now, but should get involved very early in his career as well. Cole DeMarzo is a linebacker with Michigan connections out of South Carolina, Hilton Head, rated one of the top linebackers in the state of South Carolina, but he's a multi-sport, multi-position type player. He plays wide receiver, plays linebacker, he's played safety. We look at him as a star, sort of that hybrid guy that's got to go out in space and play against, over the slot a lot. But we'll see where he plays when he gets here, but came to camp, demonstrated his abilities in camp. 10-foot long jumper, guy ran extremely well, ran 4.6, vertical 34 inches. So he's a guy, great hands. So he's a guy that we looked at and said, he'll find a place. Reminds me a lot of Matt Morrissey in a lot of ways, and the things that he does. Just very versatile for Grayson Miller type guy. Cal Halliday, 6'1", 205, extremely productive, was the school's all-time leading tackler at that high school, won 3 state championships. He's an early enrollee, was a wrestler as well as he came up through everything, but a guy that's very instinctive, plays downhill, athletic. He has a way of slipping blockers in a lot of ways. Reminds me of, I know it's a big comparison, but when I was at Ohio State as a graduate assistant, Chris Spielman walked in there about 205 and just, made every play. He's a very slippery guy, to defeat blocks, those type of things. Sort of reminds me of him in that respect. hopefully he gets to the height of Chris did. Devin Hightower, named Division II Player of the Year. Great ball skills, had 8 interceptions as a senior. I think he returned 4 of them for touchdowns. Tim Terrell is a outstanding high school football coach down in the state of Ohio at Akron Hoban. Won a state championship as a junior, early enrollee, very athletic, quick twitch. Should be a guy that gets involved very quickly as well. Obviously, a lot of these guys have to learn things conceptually and transition to this level of football, but I do think that he has a great skill set, outstanding skill set, very good tackler, quick twitch. Jack Olson, kicker, ranked as one of the top 5 kickers in the country, selected to the All-American Bowl in San Antonio, had opportunities to be the kicker in the 2 other All-Star games as well. Has made 8 field goals in 1 game, from what I understand as a junior, but watched him kick when I was at a camp, and he's got great productivity. He's got great range. He's able to kick the ball in the end zone consistently on kickoffs. He's a guy that will compete for playing opportunities immediately, and should be our kicker here for the next 3 years for sure. After this year, possibly maybe the next 3 years, but he'll compete this year. Noah Kim's an interesting guy in the fact that we've watched him and really camped here as a 10th grader, so we've watched him for a very long time. A little slight, in fact he's about 180 pounds, 6'2", but elusive, quick twitch guy, great arm, makes great decisions. I think he had 1 interception last year. This year I think he had 3, but proven winner, 41-2 as a starting quarterback, and one of those was a game that where he fractured his femur, I believe, when he was a junior. So they lost that particular football game. But big school division in Virginia, makes all the throws. And as I said, I've watched about 150 passes, and creativity and things of that nature. I think they'll do an outstanding job here. As I said on the deal there, we use black belt in karate, so hopefully it doesn't get too much criticism. Okay. Montori Foster, not played football since the 7th grade, walked in there today, I mean not today, but this year, and decided to play his senior year. Outstanding basketball player, 6'2", 175 pounds. First heard about him from Will Dow, Andrews, and David and Michael's father. He was coming out. Huge ceiling for what he's going to be able to accomplish. Great jumping ability, great hand-eye coordination. Watched him on the basketball court a couple weeks ago. Outstanding basketball player, and thought he made all the catches. Thing that really was not amazing, but very interesting to watch was his toughness out on the football field. His toughness in terms of blocking and things of that nature. But I think he can be an outstanding football player, and very excited about his potential as well. Terry Lockett made the commitment here this past weekend. Terry's a guy that we recruited really throughout the entire year. We offered him early in the process. Again, another excellent basketball player, very fluid, makes all the catches, polished receiver, great hand-eye coordination, had more than 1,000 yards receiving, all-state player from Minnesota. So outstanding player, and I look as a possibility also playing corner if we decide to do that. So we take him as basically an athlete, but he'll start on the wide receiver side of the ball, but he may find himself playing a little defense. Ian Stewart at Woodhaven, Carlson High School, finalist for Mr. Football in the state here, multi-dimensional athlete, was quarterback in high school. So you didn't see him playing wide receiver in high school too much, but you saw him in camp, 6'4", 196 pounds, also plays on defense, can run you down as a safety or as a linebacker. Very excited to watch him progress, and the fact that what he did in camp, that really earned him his opportunities for a scholarship, and then team leader in terms of what he did at Carlson in terms of quarterbacking their football team. So while you didn't see him catching the football, he did it enough in camp that we thought he could be very, very special. Ricky White from Marietta, Georgia, 6'1", he's taller than 6 foot, more like 6'1", transfer schools to Marietta from Wheeler High School. Had 97 catches for 1,300 yards and 16 touchdowns as a senior, and helping Marietta to 7A, which is the largest division in Georgia, a 7A state title in Georgia. Incredible playmaker, make people miss all over the field. Went and watched him practice for the state games last week and was extremely impressed. Very impressive guy. Great hand-eye coordination, run after catch. Again, a guy that can compete immediately. As most of you know, Jade Reed came in the summer, had to sit this year, but he's demonstrated his abilities throughout the entire fall camp and was an All-American at Western Michigan as a freshman All-American. So he will definitely add to this class. So I think we have 5 wide receivers that can add to our group we're playing right now. So it's going to be interesting to watch those guys grow. In the secondary, Angelo Gross, Ohio Mr. Football runner-up, Division III Defensive Player of the Year, led Mansfield at the state championship game. Obviously, first-team All-State, played all over the place, running back, wide receiver, punt returner, kick returner, corner, safety. He's a guy that reminds me a lot in terms of how he handles things of Josiah Scott, the way he comes to play. Tough guy, very competitive guy, and he's another guy that will come at mid-year as well. And then finally, Darius Snow, ranked as one of the top safeties in America. Got his weight down, he was about 215 or 216, got his weight down to 196 right now. He's been one of the leaders in this recruiting class. Guy that committed pretty early in the process in the fall. His father played here, Eric here, played here, and then Percy was a 2-time All-American linebacker and was in the College Football Hall of Fame as well. He was an early enrollee. But what I sensed in Darius is, as you sit and talk to him, is football knowledge, striking ability, great ball skills. Again, another guy who camped with us and demonstrated his abilities in camp. When you see him play and you watch him, watch our guys play in camp, you have an instant opportunity to compare them to players near us in our program. So I think that he'll have an opportunity to get on the field very early. He should build that foundation this spring and be a factor here coming into the fall camp. So that's, I believe, 19 guys. I know I included Jalen and Jaden in that class, but I felt like those were guys that needed to be mentioned as we go forward. So I'll take some questions and go from there. Thanks.
Mark, with Noah, it's kind of the second year in a row you guys kind of gone a little late in the process identifying the quarterback. Can you describe what you saw in him that made you extend the offer, and does your brother get credit for the assist on that one?
No. Well, I think we got Noah here to camp way back. We like the way he threw the football, number one. Really have throughout the process, and we kept watching and watching. We watched people all over America. And so as I watched Noah throughout the season, and I watched him last year, the biggest question was probably his size as he went forward. And then as you got to him and you started watching him grow, he's 6'2", coming into his senior year. And we watched him practice, had him in camp, and again we watched him throw. And if you watch the games, he makes every single throw that's out there. He's got a great arm, throw the ball 55 yards or so. But it's what he does with his feet that makes him, I think, unique. He's got the ability to get out of trouble. He's a quick twitch guy. And hasn't been sacked a whole lot. So, we just thought he was a winner. Thought he was a guy that took his team to the big school division state championships. They lost in the regional, I think, in the regional finals. And they would have been in the semis had they won. Very good player, good student basketball player as well. Could dunk and slam it, all that kind of stuff. Just like it.
Mark, 2 questions. First, talk to the college coach in Ohio that thought Petrovsky was the steal of your class. He thought that's a kid that he had marked and hoped he would fall through the cracks. What is it about him that you saw this guy thought you stole?
Well, toughness, I think, the ability to play. He plays up at Mike linebacker some. I think his natural position is down, but I think that he's a guy that he's very much like Kenny Willekes, very relentless. They play an incredible schedule. St. Ed's does, so I think they play as good a high school football maybe in the country in terms of who they play, where they play, the pressure that they're under and the system that they're in. So the fact that he's in our system helps him transition even faster, but he's just a tough guy, he's a very strong individual, explosive guy, relentless, and I think that he's gonna come and play every single day.
Talking to a couple recruits, they mentioned, not asked, they just mentioned that the staff being here and being intact was big for them. I know you had said you weren't gonna do anything about staff till after the bowl game, I'm just curious,
We're
is
talking
that-
about recruiting right now, so that's where my big focus is.
Mark, when you watch Angelo's tape, that obviously he stands out as a returner, he stood out as a receiver this year. Is there any temptation to maybe try him on the offensive side of the ball, maybe in similar ways to how you use Justin or Justin Lane? Or where do you think maybe his offensive future might be? And did you use him as kicker at all?
As a kick? No, I don't think so. Did he kick too?
He kicked all three positions.
No. You know, he's a guy that I think if he was on the offensive side of the ball, I think he would be in the slot for us. He's a guy you could get race to, you know, flip the ball to, or getting loose in the slot a little bit. But I think he will be a kick returner, punt returner type guy. I do think he'll have opportunities to do that. And, you know, he's a guy that'll come down and hit you. He's a very good tackler, and he's a guy that's just gonna compete in everything that he does. And as I said earlier, and he's an outstanding football player. Really did it all for them.
Mark, right here in the middle. The big defensive line class, was versatility a trait that, you know, was by design and was sought after, or did that just kind of happen where you end up with a lot of guys at the end that could maybe go either way in terms of end tackle?
Yeah, I think that what we look at with our defensive linemen is the same that we've always looked at. We look at guys who are athletic and explosive, and then see where they're gonna go. And so we've had those type of guys, you know, even Raekwon Williams comes in, you know, he's 260 when he comes in, now he's 300 pounds, you know, so just depends on how these guys grow, but the one thing that you have to have at that position, I feel, is great hand placement, the ability to get off blocks, the ability to run, redirect, and be explosive. So all these guys have that. Simeon Barrow is a very explosive player, so is Mayfield. You know, Mayfield goes up and just, you know, when he's 260 pounds, just slams it on the basketball court easily. You know, you got Kyle King, you got Petrosky, and I'm probably missing somebody here or something, but, yeah. But, so you know, that's what we look for with our guys. The fact that if they do come to camp makes it another positive. Some did, some didn't, but we've seen every one of these guys play in person, whether it was in the spring with pads on or whether it was in the fall. And much like every other team, we're gonna make sure that we see our guys. They've been committed long enough that we've been able to see almost all of them play football and see how they handle themselves in the football field. Not just the field of play, but between the plays too. How do they handle themselves around their teammates? What kind of leaders are they? What kind of team members are they?
Mark, over here. With Darius, you mentioned he dropped his weight down to like 190. Have you been tempted at all to move him up, let him play linebacker, and see what he can do there, or is he going to be safety all the way?
No, we recruited him as a safety. We thought that coming into camp. We didn't know whether he would play our outside backer, that hybrid backer, or be a safety. But he demonstrated in camp his ability to run and catch, you know, and jump, and all the different, you know, testing things that you do. And then also his ball skills allowed him to be a safety, and he's a great tackler, and he's a physical guy, and a lot like Kari Willis. There's going to be some things probably, but he's been a trained safety. That's what he's played. Where Kari came in and having never played safety before, but he's very much like him in terms of his explosiveness.
Mark, with this wideout class you have, does that make it easier for you to do other things, maybe with a Julian Barnett or somebody going and playing back on defense?
Yeah, it makes, you know, we moved Julian over there when Jalen Naylor got hurt. Julian has started for us at wide receiver. He's had some good games. I think he's been a guy that can play that position. But it gives us the versatility, I think, to play in both ways. I don't think he'll ever lead totally wide receiver, but there is a possibility that he can play both ways now, much like some of our other guys we've had here in the past that has been able to do, and I just think that makes him more versatile. But he was recruited here as a corner, So he definitely has those type of skills, but out of necessity, we have to play him every year.
And Mark, the amount of in-state recruits is down compared to normal for you. Is it less targets or a little bit of a down year maybe across the state? Is there a general consensus on why that is?
Yeah, I think a little bit less targets probably in the process as we went through this. And I think Michigan has great high school football, but, there's numbers issues at times in each place. So, but we're gonna recruit Michigan hard. We're gonna be in every high school and we're gonna work at it. So, but it is sort of what it is sometimes.
Mark, with their receivers, I wanted to ask you about two of them. Ricky White, I think you mentioned earlier, you guys are in him pretty early. Then he has a big senior year and probably catches a lot of attention that way. What'd you see from him very early on and with Montori to make that transition? Again, you guys were maybe one of the first big schools to go after him and got after him early and everything. What were the signs there where you felt comfortable that he could make that leap?
Well, throughout the season, we had a couple of bye weeks, so we got on the road, and then last spring as well. So for Ricky, last spring he came up, and then we went down and watched his spring practice and came away very, very impressed. Then we also had a chance to revisit him in practice this year, during the bye week. And again, he was already committed to us, but extremely impressed with his ability. He's got Dayton connections, so he's a Midwest guy, and they felt comfortable coming up to Michigan State. So very, very excited about him. I think he's a guy, I think all these guys could possibly play very early in their career. Just depends on how they come in and compete. So many times can you stay healthy in August to learn the concepts and things of that nature. Can you transition? But he certainly has the ability, and he was extremely productive for a very exciting high school football team down there in Marietta.
Montori, if you could, just
Yeah, Montori's a little bit different situation. We started hearing about him when Mr. Dow said, hey, we've got a guy for you. This guy's gonna be a player. So we're talking about a guy playing wide receivers who has to be said, the other wide receiver has to say, run the route. So he had very limited knowledge coming into the season, but they pointed him in the right direction. He just continued to excel. And when you started watching his film, his what I call hit tape, which is all the possibilities of him making a play throughout the season. You start watching that hit tape, he has outstanding jumping ability, leaping ability, great hand-eye coordination. He's got burst, and he's tough, and he'll block you. So all the things tangibly were there. Then when I went and watched him, he committed to us. Then when I went and watched him play basketball, very fluid on the basketball court, very first step quickness, those type of things. So I was very impressed and very, very excited we got him.
Does he remind you of anybody?
Remind me of anybody. I don't know, a Keyshawn Martin type of guy. Keyshawn Martin's a guy that sort of came out of nowhere. Wasn't that highly recruited, as a quarterback, and then all of a sudden we saw him immediately, and as soon as we saw Keyshawn, immediately we got him up here, and got him committed, had a great career.
Mark, over here in the back, some of like maybe 7 or 8 mid-year guys, how important was it for you guys to get, with this class in particular, that many guys in here early?
Yeah, I don't really target, we don't really target them and say, okay, that's a mid-year guy, but we want to, obviously I think it can help if they're mature enough to handle the transition. But that's an individual decision that everybody and their families need to make. So 7 of those guys made that decision, and they'll be here. And remember, I said the other 2 guys will now be able to play into that, so really got 9 new guys. Really, I know that they were here, Jalen and Jaden, but really they came late. But it is important to lay a foundation now to be able to have those guys on your depth chart and to be able to start to indoctrinate them into things conceptually. It should pay dividends as you go forward, but had guys come in here and be the last guy we signed, they're the last guy on campus, and they're the starters. So really, it's how they play in August, but gives them a foundation and allows them to start school and get going on their degrees as well early.
Coach over here in the back. I just want to talk about there's so much change happening in recruiting right now with the transfer portal, this early signing day. how much does that really take away or impact your preparations going into bowl games?
Yeah, it's different. You try to sort of juggle things. You know, the portal's another thing, and we'll continue to look in the portal and things of that nature for certain things. Positions, you've got recruiting, you've got still recruiting, because some guys, I think really what's happened this year, and I don't know if you'll notice it, but I think some people have actually stepped back and said, hey, we're not signing until February 3rd. There are people that are out there doing that now, and I think they're waiting to see how the recruiting takes them forward. So there's a little bit more of that this year maybe than there was last year. But I do think probably most people, probably 80% or 70%. I think last year was 85%. But I do think there are some players who have not made that decision yet. So we're still in that recruiting mode with them.
Mark, was there any certain position this year, there was a position of need that you really needed to fill, first of all? Secondly, with it seems like you're having to recruit with fewer than 25 scholarship slots most years because of lack of attrition usually. How hard is it to pursue needs with what seems to be fewer scholarship slots available?
Yeah, and the answer to your last question, you know, when you don't have a lot of attrition, you know, it's tight. Numbers-wise, are very tight, and you get very, very particular in terms of who you're bringing. That's why, you know, you're excited about the guys that we have, because there were a lot of long-time commitments. We made those decisions early on in the process. I think you're always going to continue to recruit guys. We've had some guys go into the transfer portal this year. Gives us an opportunity to recruit other guys. So this class can possibly be a little bit bigger, which is a positive, I think, as you look at the existing situations that are out there, you know, relative, whether it's the transfer portal or whether it's whatever it is. And then the first question on the recruiting was, what did we target?
Yes.
You know, same thing we always target. We're trying to target good football players. Obviously, defensive linemen, guys that could move and are explosive, you know, it's always something because they can transition other positions as well. Across, we took 5 offensive linemen last year, actually 4. We tried to put JD on defense, had a great, JD Duplain, had a great spring, he had a great summer camp, and he was poised to be a guy that would play some as a true freshman, but we felt like we needed to move him to offense. So with that, basically we brought 5 true offensive freshmen last year. So we needed to balance that off a little bit, which I think we did. But we're looking for playmakers on offense at the skill position and defensively at the skill position. We're looking for guys that can anchor down inside. And obviously the big skill guys got to be able to run and play across all areas. And, you know, the first thing up is going to be special teams. So they've got to be leaders in their own right, and they've got to be unselfish people that will play on with a high level of commitment and a high level of excitement, because they're going to show up first of all with special teams.
Can you mention if there's a position that you would look at in the portal? Would you go that far to say that there's a position of need in the portal?
I think that, you know, we'd look at a safety in the portal, possibly, or possibly a tailback in the portal, maybe an offensive lineman in the portal, maybe a quarterback in the portal, maybe a kicker in the portal. I don't know, you know, it depends how it all shakes out. But there's a lot that goes into that because you got to know people, and they're on the same recruiting cycle that everybody else is on. So that's dead for them right now from now until January 16th. So, you know, tough to get people on campus. So, but we'll go slow and we'll look at things as we go.
Mark, how many quarterbacks do you know that have a black belt in karate?
I have none to my knowledge. So, but that was exciting to hear. I think he competed from maybe his 3rd grade and through his 9th grade year. I just asked him if he ever broke a board. He said yes.
And going off of that then, how does a skill like that translate to the football field, and especially at that position in terms of maybe his footwork and being able to be creative, as you mentioned?
Yeah, I think as much as anything, it's the discipline that goes along with it. And in the quarterback position, you need to be disciplined. You need to be very confident in yourself, very aware of your surroundings. I think that probably carries over from karate. I don't know that to be true. I'm not an expert, but I would think that holds that value. And then also, I think he is a quick twitch guy, and you can see that on film. You can see his running ability on film, his ability to get out of problems, and as I said, he's got a great release. I think his release is very good. He throws it tight, and we've had, we had the opportunity to send Coach Salem in there and watch him throw. The opportunity to see him because they were in the state championship. We had Coach Ward, that run. We had Coach Warner be able to watch him practice as well and throw in cold, wet conditions, and the ball, he could spin it. And that, at the end of it all, can you spin it as a quarterback? And he could do those things. So very excited that he's part of this class.
Wouldn't want to be on the end of a stiff arm from him. That'd probably be really tough. Kind of wanted to get an overview of where you feel recruiting regionally is right now for you guys. Do you feel like there's more competition from schools maybe outside of the Big Ten that have kind of hit the area? And do you feel like maybe some of what your blueprint and your staff's blueprint has been historically is trickling out to other programs?
Well, I can't answer that for other programs. I can say that I think that Midwest is great football. I think the trend probably for a lot of people is to stay closer to home than go farther away. That's probably the trend. Just, with families and things of that nature. So we're going to spend our time in level one, what we call it. And quite honestly, we'll know more about the players that are closest to us because they're able to come to games and we're around them more and we're able to know more people that know them as players or as people. So we're always going to start inside and work our way out. It's not to say we don't go to Texas. We did. Darius has been up here and he's got connections to Michigan State, and he's been up here probably 6 or 7 times. The bottom line is, can you get people on campus in the process? And now, the way the rules are, when you have players coming in June for an official visit, then you have to maintain that relationship throughout the entire fall semester, fall season, and they may not possibly get up here, while they may possibly be able to get to a school near them. So it becomes a little bit tougher. But I think we have great football in this area. We've always done it this way. It's paid dividends in the past. I look back at 2007. We have guys that are still playing in the NFL from the 2007 class. Garrett Selleck, Kirk Cousins. Those guys are still playing. So I think even B.J. Cunningham is still playing in Canada. So it's all about what do they do when they get here, how do they develop, and what can they do as people as they meet their challenges, I think, at the next level, at this level. When I say the next level, I mean this level.
Mark, every year there's national recruiting rankings, or whatever they actually work. But you've had a lot of success with classes that might not have been ranked nearly as high as you'd hoped. This class not ranked nearly as high as maybe some of the other classes in the Big Ten, but what traits do you need to see out of this class to make sure they're like the other classes that have had success here?
Well, I think when you're watching them, do they win championships? Are they on winning football teams? Are they team captains? How do they handle themselves around their peers? I think all those things are issues or transitional things as you go forward. Can they handle challenges? Do they play other sports? How are they? All these guys are. I can't say. When you start looking at guys and say, okay, who are the top 300 players in America? There are a lot of good football players in America. So you have to anticipate how they're going to develop, and you sort of build it from there. But that's what we've always done. We see a good football player. I really don't look at the stars. I just don't, because we've had guys come here that are 4-star players that have never played. I've had other guys come here. Daquez Denard, Tulsa dropped him during the recruiting process. His one offer, Tulsa dropped him. And we swooped in and said, hey, I think this guy's a very, very good football player. So there is not scientific approach. There is a science to it, but not total. They make, they do the same thing in the NFL. It's the same process, even more to a higher level. But why does a free agent make it in the NFL? You just can't answer those questions. Why does a 7th-round pick play on and a 1st-round pick doesn't? So I think it just goes with the competitive nature of people, who they've competed against, how they come up, and there's so many the intangibles that an individual has that allows them to go forward. And so we're betting on those things as we go, and some of those are unseen, but we have a strong feel about them.
Mark, with the 19 guys you announced today, is there a number you see the class finishing at when you go through February? And I know you can't mention guys specifically who haven't signed, but if there was a guy who was committed to you and didn't sign today, you still consider those guys commits?
Yes.
And,
We still commit.
and the total number for the class you think it might be?
21, 22, 23, 24. I don't know. You know, it just depends. There's a lot of things going on. I mean, it's just, in this day and age, what's the number? You know, so, because you don't know what's happening within your own program sometimes. You think you do, but sometimes, you know, there's change. And that's the world we're living in. I understand that. So don't want that, but sometimes it's inevitable too. So, but we're gonna recruit guys that can come and play here at this level, and there are a couple positions of need that we still need to focus on, and we'll address those.
Running back, do you think you'll take one or two this class, or?
Yes.
You guys will think about Mark's lobby, then if you have any full questions after that.
Mark, I have a couple more for you. When you do look at these next 2 months until February, what, can you say position-wise, what you might be looking at to target with those last couple of spots? And I guess beyond that, you know, when you talk about the portal, I know it's all new and everyone's still trying to figure it out, but I guess long-term, do you see that being more of a factor in the late period versus the first one, just because of guys leaving mid-season and you're already trying to finish high school stuff? And I don't know, do you foresee that playing out where that's mostly a later deal in the February period?
With Porto?
Yeah, coming and going, whether it's this program or.
Yeah, I think that unless an individual has a particular place in mind, I think that for most people, you know, you're focused on your season. You know, you focus on who you're recruiting, and the portal becomes something that maybe you're trying to, you know, bring a guy in. You know, I can't really say that we've not brought a guy in yet from the portal, but yeah.
I guess
Except for him, yeah.
mostly was just asking, does it sort of have to become a secondary thing until February, just because?
Doesn't have to be.
Timing?
It doesn't have to be, no, it doesn't have to be. It could be a primary thing. It just depends on the situation, I think, and I think everybody's dealing with it.
Mark mentioned, you know, haven't brought much in from the transfer portal, but with a position like quarterback, I mean, you mentioned earlier, there's several you could look at, but would you really consider going after a quarterback if it was right fit, or is that something you really would prefer to sort of grow on your own through, you know?
I think those are conversations that are in-house conversations as we go forward and see what our guys do too. You know, so, but right now, focus on trying to watch our quarterbacks during bowl practice and get them ready to play next season. I think they have a huge upside, so but they got to play well.
Mark, is there any position group that you have so much confidence in right now you can say, we're a little more traction? Did you have a question that you had to answer a lot?
I don't think we take a wide receiver right now. I feel very, very good about our wide receiver position. You know, we use Darryl Stewart, we use Brandon Sowers, everybody else is back. And also, I think we have 4 really talented guys, really 5, count Jaden coming in. So I don't really see that as an area that we would look towards. In terms of what we've said, you know, I'm just trying to be straight up with people and honest with people as we go through this and do the very best I can. And, you know, our entire staff and our entire program recruits, you know, our players recruit, you know, system recruits, in terms of just who we are as people and what we're trying to accomplish. So I appreciate, one of the things, I think, as much as anything, I appreciate really throughout the years, really, has been the lack of decommitments that we've had, but once somebody has made a commitment, and I appreciate their trust in us as people. So.
Just kind of back on the portal question again, how much right now are you guys relying on maybe pre-existing relationships, whether you had guys on campus or had offers out to them as they enter the portal? Is that something that plays a big factor right now with the previous knowledge?
Yeah, I think some of that would, but you wonder how many of them are actually in that category. So we're trying to look at the portal, and we're trying to look at the portal, break it down, because there's 2,000 names in there. So you got to break it down by position, what year they're at, how many plays do they actually play, what's their background, you know, and you got all these different questions that you have to answer. And it becomes difficult to find all the information that you need. So we're gonna just look for it, to it as an area in positions of need and sort of go from there and take it step by step, because I think this is a new and developing saga. I'll call it a saga. Okay, journey. All right.
You guys got any more questions at all on Wake or anything?
As far as the bowl goes, Theo Day yesterday said that Wake Forest does some things on defense that you haven't seen in the secondary. Can you address some of the things that Wake Forest does defensively that are unique?
I think that what they'll do is with their coverage, they're gonna line up in certain things and give you different looks and then stem to the coverage that they're gonna play pretty late in the down. So while that's good, you know, if they don't quite get there, that's not so good. So, you know, they've got a lot of different things that they do in that capacity, so they may line up here and stem the safety all the way to the far hash, those type of things. But well-coached football team, and they've had a great deal of success.
I don't know if this is specifically a bold question or more pertinent towards signing day, but you have a guy in Kenny Willikis who just won kind of a unique award as a former walk-on. I'm just curious if you're able to sort of reflect on him and what he was like when he first got here, and maybe when you noticed that he was potentially a better long-term contributor than some of the guys who were on scholarship.
Yeah, you know, Kenny won the Burlsworth Award last week, and it's a tremendous award, and it's just been named really to the National Group of Awards. So it's in his 10th year, and I don't know how much you guys know about it. Brandon Burlsworth was died tragically in a car accident 11 days after he was drafted. But we've had a lot of guys come over the course of time. You know, you can think back to Jack Conklin, you can think to Kyler Ellsworth. I could go on. Not just Kenny, who've come here and done a tremendous job in terms of accelerating their play. Kenny's relentless. I've said that many times. I first started thinking that he could be a player for us early in the spring, not early, but in the spring of 2017, when he finally got opportunities. He's a smart player, he's a tough player, he's relentless, he's got very quick twitch, he's a powerful guy. But he's been able to build himself to that over the course of time, you know, from a 215, 220-pound linebacker into this. But he had the 6'3" frame to put that on, so he's done a great job. I was very impressed with his speech.
Mark, we talked to Brian, Ray, Kenny, Mike, David, all said they're playing in the bowl games. Is there anybody you anticipate to skip the bowl game?
No. You know, and I think it's a testament to, I've said over and over about our football team, our chemistry, our excitement in terms of how we come out to practice every day, and just their temperament as people. And it hasn't been perfect this year, and I'm the first one to sit there and admit that. But the way they come every day to lead and then to compete has been extremely impressive. And all those guys figure to be in somewhere in a camp next year, either drafted or otherwise. So I think it's a statement.
And as far as when the signing, or I'm sorry, the bowl presser, you had said you wanted to get the 4 quarterbacks all meaningful reps. I know it's kind of early in practice, but how have you seen that competition shake out where you're getting guys a little more look with the first team or something like that?
Well, I think what we look for right now is to give them opportunities to play in meaningful snaps, especially like Peyton Thorne, who's not had that opportunity to play in their system as much. He's been a scout team quarterback, giving him some opportunities in Pascal and things of that nature. Same with Theo Day. You know, it's hard to get 3 quarterbacks ready. Majority of time is spent with 2 quarterbacks, Rocky being the second. So giving Theo opportunities. Rocky gets plenty as he goes through it. So I think Theo Day and Peyton are the 2 guys that you want to see. And let's give them some opportunities in there. So we're going to invest in that. We've done some what I would call showtime, not scrimmages, because we've not gone full live with that, but some opportunities at the end of practice where they have an opportunity to show up. We'll do that again today.
Mark, Kevin Jarvis, do you think he'll be back, or anybody else that we haven't seen in a little bit that could be back for this game?
You know, I'm not going to talk about injuries right now, but we're going to see how it all shakes out next week. If they can't play next week, I'll let you know.
And just obviously playing, you're used to playing indoors or warm weather this time of year. How much are you practicing outside, and how important, I guess, is that?
Yeah, we go outside every day. I don't know about today, it says -2 or 2. But we've gone out every day, probably about half the practice in and out. So we're gonna make sure that we don't come too accustomed to being inside. So we have done that, and we have worked at it. We ran 160 plus plays the other day, so we're gonna work at it. So a bunch of them are outside.
Wanted to pick your brain a little bit, what you've seen on Wake Forest from the offensive side. They obviously run a lot of plays,
Yeah.
run at a very high snap count. And how do you, I guess, prepare for that? And where do they compare to the other teams that you played that played that kind of tempo?
Well, it's we're playing up-tempo offenses all the time, so, we understand how to play against it, but you just don't know until you play them how fast they're coming. I've heard that they're as fast as anyone in the country, so we're practicing, every 12 seconds, 10 seconds, that type of thing. So the ability to focus in that amount of time and focus and bend your knees is, I think, paramount to your success in these things. But it's interesting because they're a little bit of a contradiction, because while they line up very fast, when they run the inside zone, it's a very deliberate inside zone with the ball being handed to the running back in a very slow fashion and creating a situation where our linebackers have to make the correct read. Or it's their offensive back almost trotting across the formation until he sees the seam, then hitting it. So while they're going really fast, once they start to play, that mesh is sometimes at 2 seconds, which I think that's unusual because we really haven't seen that. So you got to stay in your gap. I don't think there's any message to that. You can't get out of your gap. You got to play gap sound with great leverage, and you got to be able to tackle. I've been extremely impressed with their running backs. They're going to work you hard. So, and the quarterbacks and the wide receivers. I know they have some injuries as well, but what you see on tape has been impressive.
Last two, Jack.
Mark, obviously, job one is winning the game, but if you had the opportunity, would you like to play? Do you plan to play more than one quarterback?
The goal is to win the football game, so we'll see where that takes us. And to answer your question, I'd love to play another one, because that would mean that we're getting goal number 1 done, that's job one.
Brian's been through a lot here over the course of 3 years as a starter, and even going back to his redshirt freshman year. Just the one game left. Have you seen anything in him that approaching that last game as far as how you think he'll handle it and what you see from him?
Yeah, I think he'll be excited to play. He's 28, I think he's 28 completions away from being the all-time leader in completions at Michigan State. I think he has 695 completions. So he's been a very productive quarterback in that capacity. We can't make mistakes on offense, can't turn it over. But he's a guy that's, he's done a lot of great things here. So I think he's very excited about the opportunity, and his last game as a Spartan, so I think he'll play well. We certainly anticipate that. Pretty good? All right, thanks.